I'm on my third try filming this. If it doesn't go well, I'm abandoning this video. Hello guys! Firstly, we should address the elephant in the room. Yes, I did get my nails done. Thank you for noticing. Now I'm going to address the real elephant in the room. I haven't filmed a video since November, and that is for reasons that I won't divulge, even though it's mainly just because I didn't want to. But we got a banger today. On the 13th of May 2005, the film Monster-in-Law was released in cinemas. The film followed a young Charlotte, played by J-Lo, and her tumultuous relationship with her overbearing mother-in-law on the lead up to her wedding. The wacky and wild behaviour that the mother-in-law exhibits is absurd and hyperbolic. However, I'm sure it's very relatable to a lot of people. I'm going to come back to the film towards the end of the video, but for now, let's explore who is the monster-in-law and what is the real-life parallel. Guys, I'm editing. Don't judge my dirty laptop. And I forgot to mention the thing that inspired me to film this entire video, which was the whole, Brooklyn Beckham scandal, which, if you haven't seen it, Brooklyn Beckham released these statements, amongst others. In short, Victoria Beckham apparently went to every length possible to break up Brooklyn and now wife Nicola by inviting ex-girlfriends over, spoiling the wedding, cancelling the wedding dressmaking. Very much monster-in-law adjacent. As I'm going to discuss at the end of this video, it's a toxic cycle. I thought this would be a great stepping point for the premise of the video, and I forgot to mention it in my script, so I'm mentioning it now. So yeah, that is what inspired me to make this video. I am going to use him in the thumbnail, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. If you're wondering what separates the overbearing mother-in-law from the average mother-in-law, this is usually how it follows. The mums who settle into the stereotype are usually mums who have such a strong connection to their child, normally a son, they're unwilling to share their child with anybody else. Because of this, they tend to smother their adult children, often acting as a barrier to them developing any kind of independence. This will include discouraging them from developing key skills that will allow them to live independently, like driving, cooking, laundry, anything of the sorts. Who is the mama's boy? The mama's boy is overly dependent on his mum for everything, for the reasons that we just explored. In case you aren't getting it, I'm going to give you an example. This is Michael. This is the closest thing I could find to a Michael-shaped object in my room. I'm sorry, I'm not buying a doll just for this video. I'm sorry. Michael's 25. Michael lives at home with his parents to save money, just like most of us do. Michael doesn't know how to cook, doesn't know how to clean, doesn't know how to run the washing machine or the dishwasher, because his mum takes care of it all for him. Michael's mum didn't want him to get a job while he was at uni, so Michael is also financially dependent on his parents, as now he struggles to get a job in adulthood. Michael one day meets a girl. This is our lady. Again, I'm not buying a doll for this video. I'm sorry. Instead of embracing Michael's partner as a part of his life, Michael's mum becomes jealous that Michael is now dependent for a portion of his affection on another person. Instead of teaching Michael some independence so maybe one day he could move out, Michael's mom instead exhibits a series of petty and absurd behaviour that eventually drives away. This leads to Michael ultimately being called a mama's boy and being dumped. You see how the issue arises? In case the picture isn't clear, think of every K-drama that you've seen where rich mom offers the poor daughter-in-law £1 million to go away. Several online creators have shared their mother-in-law horror stories. I'm gonna insert one right here.
Random things that my ex-mother-in-law didn't said because she fancied her own son. I think she wanted to marry him. Completely blanked me for the first 4 days of knowing me. Incredibly awkward because I was staying at my boyfriend's apartment. Some mornings we would wake up, my boyfriend would have gone to training and I would be there with just her. And I would be in the kitchen, let's say, and she would walk out of the apartment and not say goodbye. Just slam the door. Adios. And that would be after I would say good morning to her, obviously, because I'm not a weirdo. Got to the point where when he saw it, he was like, excuse me, Sarah's here, can you say hello to her? And her excuse for not being able to talk to me, or just not even bothering, was that there was a language barrier. Now, I totally understand that I do speak very fast sometimes, and maybe it is a little bit hard to decipher what on earth I'm saying. But her son had exactly the same accent as me, because he hadn't seen his mum in 11 years. And she told him that if I had any respect for him, I would go and learn their language. Her own son could not speak their language.
This is the mother of your partner who doesn't respect boundaries, who loves to gossip, who's impossible to please, and it sucks. Majority of the time their husbands don't recognise this toxic pattern of behaviour. They allow their partner to be picked on, and often when children are involved, it gets even more dicey. Mother-in-laws will often use the excuse of, well, that child wouldn't exist without me because my son is 50% of the DNA. However, the mom is the other 50%, and I think that we forget that. Now we know what the overbearing mother-in-law looks like and what the mum's boy looks like. Let's explore how the overbearing mother-in-law came to be. The traditional role of women within a nuclear family is to be domesticated whilst a somewhat decent housewife. The gender role varies from culture to culture and is ever evolving. However, the stereotype of women being the homemaker seems to stay consistent. Why does this happen? It roots all the way down to socialisation. I am aware that there's more than girls and boys, but just for the sake of this example, I'm only going to go into the example of girls and boys. To put it simply, girls and boys are socialised differently. Girls are often socialised to be sweet and friendly, and their toys often mimic real-life domesticated tasks like cooking, cleaning, childcare. The parallel is that boys are expected to be tough and strong, and their toys often also mimic that. They usually play with monster trucks and Nerf guns and bow and arrows. But we live in 2026. Nobody thinks like that anymore. Well, patriarchal expectations are also heavily embedded in culture and religion, and when children witness their parents living out this dynamic, they often mimic that in adulthood. That's where the ludicrous expectation of the mother-in-law is birthed. The woman that enters the son's life must meet those ridiculous expectations in order to be accepted into the family. If you're Desi, you're probably quite familiar with this dynamic, but think of the South Asian women that are held to ridiculously high standards, especially when compared to South Asian men. The women normally cook, do all the cleaning, arrange all the events, take care of the kids, whilst the men sit their feet up and drink whiskey. As South Asian women, we are expected to be clean, well kept, with a full head of black hair, and fair. We must be able to cook, our homes must be spotless, as it's a symbol of South Asian pride, as well as being modest, devoted, loyal, palatable, fertile, healthy, slim, all whilst your husband doesn't lift a finger. Why is this an issue? Now, I am a feminist, okay? I don't want to hear it from anyone, okay? I'm a feminist, I'm not apologising. And so if a woman wants to stay at home and do all the domestic tasks while her husband goes out and work, that's perfectly fine. That is perfectly okay. There is no issue with that. However, I think people overestimate how common this actually is. In 2023, only 90 to 21% of all families were on a single income. The other 80% were on double income. Things are expensive, especially children, so the majority of women in heterosexual relationships have to work anyway. This is what's characterised as the dual burden, when women take on domestic work as well as paid work. But that can't be that hard, right? Wrong! Let me introduce you to the triple shift. Two researchers called Duncombe and Marsden carried out in-depth interviews with 40 married couples, analysing the inequalities between men and women in domestic life. They found that not only do women take on the burden of paid and domestic work, but they also manage emotional work within the relationship. Emotional work can include stuff like arranging birthday parties, smoothing conflicts, managing relationships, providing emotional support. It's an additional job for women. Almost all of the women in this study as well reported feeling dissatisfied in their marriage and neglected by their partner. The men, however, reported feeling extremely satisfied in their marriage, benefiting from their partner's emotional labour. Now, before we go back to Monster-in-Law, I want to bring you back to a more contemporary example of the nightmare mother-in-law in Crazy Rich Asians. The fact that this film was made 13 years after Monster-in-Law, yet the message still rings true, just shows that this is a stereotype which doesn't seem to be disappearing. 2018 rom-com follows Rachel, a university professor, who is dating Nick, a rich heir from Singapore. We follow her navigating the extravagant lifestyle that Nick's family and friends live, while she faces constant criticism from Nick's mum, Eleanor, played by Michelle Yeoh. Eleanor makes her disapproval of Nick and Rachel extremely prevalent throughout the film, even telling Nick's grandma in front of Rachel that she thinks that Rachel isn't good enough for Nick. After the days and days of torment, Rachel decides to break up with Nick out of fear of causing scandal for the family. Rachel wholeheartedly believes that she's doing the best thing for Nick by breaking up with him, as his wealth is at risk if he continues his relationship with Rachel. The parallel is Eleanor feels in some sick, twisted way that she's doing the best thing for Nick by breaking them up, and that is where the conflict arises. The hatred for the daughter-in-law is less explicit than in Monster-in-Law, it still rings apparent. Let's go back to the original film. Jane Fonda's character, Viola, despises Charlotte. She thinks that Charlotte is lazy and arrogant and not good enough for her son. Sound familiar? She goes to extreme lengths to stop Kevin and Charlotte getting married, even poisoning Charlotte at their engagement dinner. This behaviour is consistent throughout the entire film, really, until it comes to a head at the end, where Viola comes to Charlotte's wedding in a white dress. She triggers a brawl. Viola attacks Charlotte, and Charlotte finally asks the question of, what did I do to make you hate me so much? Whilst this question isn't answered explicitly, we then see Viola's mother-in-law walk in. She calls her tacky. She says that she's the reason that her son, Viola's husband, died. Expresses her disdain for her, in short. And in case you can't tell, this is kind of the point of the video, is that the monster-in-law is a lot less of a antagonist than we think. We sympathise with Eleanor because we understand that as a mother she thinks that she's doing the best thing for her child, and we sympathise with Viola for a very different reason. Viola was exposed to large amounts of criticism from her mother-in-law, who hated everything she did and everything she was, so she exposed Charlotte to the exact same. It's a form of generational trauma that never really dissolves. Each generation feels the burden of an evil mother-in-law, and so carries the same resentment for the next. Each mother-in-law was once a daughter-in-law as well, and they were treated the exact same as they're treating them. It's kind of like how abuse is a vicious cycle, right? Parents who were abused as children go on to abuse their children because they feel entitled to, because it's what they were exposed to, it's what they had to go through. Just because one generation went through something terrible does not mean the next one has to, right? We all face our own issues. Same logic as when boomers say, like, oh, the reason why you Gen Z can't afford houses is because you spend all your money on coffees and nights out. Obviously not. The assumptions of the older generation are very sharp in the sense that they assume that less societal struggle equals less struggle overall, which is just not true. I hope the vicious cycle does end with our generation. I hope that our generation doesn't go on to bully the daughter-in-laws that come to be. Because how many more Rachels and Charlottes do we have to see on the big screen before we recognise this toxic pattern of behaviour? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought it would be a lot of a longer video because my script was quite long, but it wasn't, so I hope you all enjoyed this. And give it a like if you liked it. Give it a like.